Good morning students. Today is lecture 12 under module 4. In this lecture, today we will discuss about the membrane transport. So, what is passive transport, what is active transport, then we will see what are the phenomenological equations, the different types of driving forces, and then we will discuss the Onsager's non-equilibrium thermodynamics. So, a membrane can be defined as a perm selective barrier between two homogeneous phases. A molecule or particle is transported across a membrane from one phase to another phase because forces acts on that molecule or particle. We are just revisiting what we have discussed in our earlier classes. The extent of this force is determined by the gradient in potential or approximately by difference in potential across the membrane divided by the membrane thickness. So, if you remember, many times I have told you in our subsequent discussions, then the resistance to the transport is one of the most important thing that has to be taken care of. So, when you are devising or making a membrane, or when you are devising developing a membrane process itself. So, one of the most important parameter is the thickness of the membrane. So, it is quite understood that for a porous membrane or even per se in non-porous membrane also, the thickness also plays an important role. More the thickness, the more will be the resistance to the flow. So, the driving force is given by the difference in potential by the thickness of membrane. So, usually we come across two different types of potential difference. One is the chemical potential difference delta mu, which we have discussed in our earlier classes, and another is the electrical potential difference, the delta F. Now, in passive transport, component or particles are transported from high to low potential. So, we have a high potential and then there is a low potential, and in between there is a membrane. So, the transport of solutes or particles are happening due to the gradient in potential from high to low, and the gradient is delta x by delta x. Small x is the basically a distance, and the average driving force is equal to the difference in potential across the membrane divided by the membrane thickness. Okay. So, this is the average driving force, and if no external forces is applied to the system, it will reach equilibrium when the potential difference has becomes 0, right. So, if we are not applying any particular forces onto this type of system, passive transport, then the system will reach equilibrium when the potential difference has almost become 0. So, when the driving force is kept constant, a constant flow will occur through the membrane after establishment of a steady state. This is the schematic shows how actually the passive transport is happening from high potential to low potential. So, the proportionality relationship between the flux and the driving force is given by this particular equation. Here flux equals to proportionality constant, which is usually denoted by A into driving force. Now, phenomenological equations are generally they are black box type of equations, which tells us nothing about the chemical and physical nature of the membrane. Please note that the membrane itself also plays a very important role. That means, the membrane itself means the type of polymer or type of material that is being used to prepare membrane, and what is their physicochemical properties. And then how the transport is related to the membrane structure, that is also this phenomenological equation is silent about. It is not telling, because you see the equation is just proportionality constant into the driving force. So, what is the proportionality constant? The proportionality constant determines how fast the component is transported through the membrane. It has nothing to do with the membrane material and how the transport is happening. It is just telling that how fast the component is transported through the membrane. So, have a close look at this schematic diagrams, where we are showing two basic forms of transport, active and passive transport. Okay. So, this is what you can see, this we just discussed in the earlier slide, this one. Okay. High potential to lower potential. Now, please understood that this type of transport, which is passive transport, can also be carried out with the help of a molecule usually called carrier. Okay. So, denoted by C. Now, what is happening? Why do we need this? These are called facilitated transport. Okay, we will discuss this in one of our classes later on, but let us try to understand the concept. What is this? What is the meaning of facilitated transport, and when do we need it? It may happen that sometimes there are certain components or molecules which are not able to transport through the membrane by virtue of the concentration gradient or the potential gradient itself. but we need to transport it or we need to separate it. So, what should we do that? So, in that situations we can employ a molecule which is called a carrier molecule, which are usually imparted inside the membranes. They are available freely or suspended freely inside the membrane pores, or they may be fixed also, it depends. So, this carrier molecule will bind the solute which is A here, okay, and form a intermediate complex called AC, which is highly unstable, and then it will go to the permeate side. Okay. So, basically A is binding to the C, AC is forming, okay, that is the unstable carrier solute complex. When it reaches to the permeate side, the A is diffuses to the permeate side. So, this is called carrier mediated transport or facilitated transport. Okay. Now, if I want to have this type of transport, when I am moving from a low potential, here you see that this is a low potential and this is to a high potential, then this is called active transport. So, that means I am going against the gradient of the potential difference. So, to do that, these are mostly biological transport are like this, biological system transports are like this. So, to that we need something which is called a energy. So, we need an extra energy, okay, to achieve this transport, because try to understand that we are moving from a lower concentration to a higher concentration or low potential to high potential. To achieve that, I need something, some extra energy. That energy will be supplied by forms of chemical energy, or in case of this chemical systems, or ATPs in case of biological systems. So, active transport is an extremely important phenomenon in these biological systems. Here the species A is transported against its concentration gradient through a cell membrane. We are talking about the biological systems here in this case per se, for example. Since the process is not spontaneous, it requires an input energy to happen. This is what exactly I was just I just told you. So, there are two classic examples. So, one is the movement of sodium and potassium ions through the cell membrane of the red blood cell, the RBC, both against the concentration gradient, right. Then transport of glucose, okay, from blood to liver cell. So, actually the glucose concentration in the liver cell is much higher than that of the blood cell. So, but the liver cells needs the glucose as its substrate to survive. So, for that they need to have intake more intake of glucose from the blood cell. So, the in the blood cell the glucose is in lower concentration that of the sugar cell, in that of the liver cell. So, basically what is happening, the glucose is moving from a lower potential to a higher potential. So, this is how this happens. I will just try to show you in the next slide. Okay. So, the mechanism of active transport is quite complex. So, it has been suggested that species to be transported bind to the transport protein present in the cell membrane. So, there are certain proteins present in the cell membranes of even our cells also, and animals and all mammals. Okay. So, those proteins are called transport proteins. Some of the specific proteins are also called Rho proteins. Okay. Now, what is the job of these proteins? Now, these proteins will bind this sodium, potassium or glucose, and then by binding it, then when it binds it, it will help in to transport this particular sodium, potassium or glucose across the cell membrane, right. There is a cell membrane. So, that sodium, potassium or glucose needs to cross the cell membrane. So, these proteins will help them to cross that. So, once they reach the other side of the cell membrane, okay, or the permeate side, let us say, it will diffuse out, whether it is sodium, potassium or glucose, or per se there are many other things also, it is not only limited to these three. So, the protein actually squeezes and then pumps the species out. It is something like a peristaltic mechanism. You see, this is a peristaltic pump mechanism. I am just trying to show you to understand how the cell membrane actually works. So, you see here, okay, this is the input, these are silicon tubes which is getting squeezed here. Okay, squeezing, then it is leaving, again squeezing, then it is leaving, again squeezing, then it is coming out. So, this is the way the peristaltic pump actually works. Okay. Actually, our digestive system in humans or mammals, it also mostly works in this type of mechanism. So, it squeezes in, squeezes out, squeezes in, squeezes out. Okay. And energy required for squeezing the transport protein and pumping out the ions or molecules for active transport is supplied by adenosine triphosphate in case of the biological systems. So, now let us understand the driving forces. So, transport across a membrane takes place when a driving force, that is chemical potential difference or electrical potential difference, acts on the individual component in the system. The potential difference arises as a result of differences in either pressure, concentration, okay, temperature or electrical potential, right. Since I told you earlier also, since I cannot measure chemical potential directly, so we always express chemical potential in terms of certain measurable parameters, may it be pressure, may it be concentration, it may be temperature. So, membrane processes involving an electrical potential difference usually occurs in cases of dialysis, electrodialysis, okay. And many transport processes takes place because of the differences in chemical potential. Under isothermal conditions, pressure and concentration contribute to the chemical potential of the component I, okay. So, let us see this equation. So, mu I is the chemical potential of the species I equals to mu I naught, okay. This is a constant, okay, or the pure species. So, basically this is chemical potential of the same species, but pure, okay. Then RT ln AI, AI is the activity, then VIP, okay. So, Vi is the molar volume and P is the pressure. So, the concentration or composition is given in terms of activity in order to express the non-ideality, right. So, activity can be given by this is gamma I xi, okay, where gamma is the activity coefficient, okay, and xi is the mole fraction. Now, we know most of for our ideal cases, your activity coefficient usually tends to 1. So, then AI becomes equal to the mole fraction, okay. So, AI becomes xi, okay, when gamma I, okay, becomes 1. So, the chemical potential can be subdivided into a difference in composition and difference in pressure. Now, we can understand that how the difference in chemical potential is basically due to two terms, okay. So, this is your pressure term, okay, and this is your composition or concentration terms. So, if the chemical potential and the electrical potential are considered to be the driving force and assuming ideal conditions, that means AI, your chemical your activity is equals to mole fraction, and del of ln xi equals to 1 over xi del xi, we can express the average driving force like this in this equation. So, RT by L delta xi by xi, then Zi zeta this L delta E Vi by L delta P. So, L is the thickness of the membrane. So, now we have to just rearranging the things. So, all multiplying the above equation by factor L by RT. So, we just want to make the these groups as dimensionless groups, okay. So, we will get force dimensionless is delta xi by xi, then this particular group delta E Vi by RT delta P. So, again we can write in terms of constant. So, this is the equation actually, delta xi by xi plus delta E by E star plus delta P by P star. So, E star is this, okay, this is constant, and P star is RT by Vi. So, the concentration potential is open unity, while the pressure term strongly dependent on the kind of component involved, that is on the molar volume. Some approximately values are given below actually. If it is gas, then it is P, if it is macromolecules it is 0.0032 to 0.3 megapascal like this. So, for gases P star equals to P, we assume that gases behaves ideally. The electrical potential depends on the valency Zi. So, Zi is equals to your, this is your valency of the species I. So, this is 8.3 into 300 divided by 10 power of 5 Zi. So, 1 over 40 Zi. So, electrical potential is very strong driving force, it is a very strong driving force in comparison to pressure, which is weak force. A concentration term of unity equates to an electrical potential difference of 1 by 40 volt for Zi equals to 1. Whereas a pressure of 1200 bar is needed to produce the same driving force for water transport. So, what we understand from this is that if we want to have the same type of driving force, let us say for water transport, okay, having an electrical potential difference as well as a pressure difference. So, for a electrical potential difference 1 by 40 volt is enough to do that to get that driving force. However, the same driving force if I want to achieve through the pressure, then I have to use 1200 bar, which is huge pressure, you can understand that. So, in pervaporation of water through a dense membrane, a downstream pressure of 0 leads to the same flux as an infinite upstream pressure. So, we will discuss pervaporation in detail in some classes, in our subsequent classes. So, pervaporation is a system in which actually I am just in a nutshell I am telling. So, this is a membrane, okay, and this is a membrane, right. So, what is happening? So, feed is coming here, okay. So, the permeate is coming and this will get retented. So, what is happening in pervaporation? The permeate vaporization. So, the whatever permeate is coming here, okay, so that is getting vacuumized. Okay. So, we are why do we do that? So, we create a low vapor pressure, so that they will condense. This is the actually mechanism. So, this is pervaporation membranes are also mostly these are non-porous membranes. So, the mechanism is solution diffusion. Now, let us discuss non-equilibrium thermodynamics. Now, flux equations derived from irreversible thermodynamics give a real description of transport through membranes. However, transport process through membrane cannot be considered as considered as thermodynamically equilibrium process. This we have discussed in our first or second class, if you remember. Okay, and therefore, only thermodynamics of the irreversible processes can be used to describe membrane transport. In irreversible processes and thus in membrane transport, free energy is dissipated continuously. In case the constant driving force is maintained and the entropy is produced. Now, entropy is continuously produced if transport across a membrane, that is due to the driving force a flow is produced. Now, this entropy production is in most cases irreversible energy loss or exergy loss. This entropy increase due to irreversible process is given by the dissipation function phi. This dissipation function can be expressed as a summation of all irreversible processes. So, each can be described as the product of a conjugated flows and forces x. So, phi equals to T ds by dt, s is the entropy, so summation of Ji xi. So, Ji is the flux and xi is the force. Now, the flows do not really only refer to the transport of mass, okay, but also transfer of heat and electrical current. This is also very important, right. So, the fluxes are expressed in relative to the fixed membrane as reference frame with constant boundaries. Close to equilibrium, it is assumed that each force is linear related to the fluxes or each flux is linearly related to the forces. So, the latter approach is usually used in membranes, the force approximation. Okay. So, xi equals to summation of Rij Jj or Jj can be written as summation of Lij Xj. So, considering the above equation for a single component transport, a very simple relationship can be obtained with only one proportionality coefficient. So, idea is to make the life easier, so that we will use only one proportionality constant to derive the single component transport equation. If the driving force is the gradient in the chemical potential, then we can write J1 equals to L1 x1, that is equals to minus L1 d mu 1 by dx. Now, in case of the transport of two components, that is 1 and 2, there are two flux equations with 4 coefficients. So, the same equation can be written, okay, and we can write in terms of different other components, which can be expressed as L11, L22, L12 and L21. Right. So, similarly, in case of transport of 3 components, there are 3 flux equations and 9 coefficients. So, in absence of an electrical potential, the driving force is the gradient of chemical potential. So, how we can write this equation? Just have a look at these two equations. So, J1 equals to minus L11 d mu 1 by dx minus L12 d mu 2 by dx, and J2 equals to minus L21 d mu 1 by dx and minus L22 d mu 2 by dx. Now, what are those things? Now, the first term on the right hand side of the first equation corresponding to the flux of component 1 under its own gradient, okay, while the second terms gives the contribution of the gradient of the component 2, okay, to that of the flux of the component 1. Okay. So, this is with own gradient, and this is due to the contribution of component 2 to the flux of component 1. That means, this one component 2, okay, is also affecting the flux of component 1, and how it is affecting, that can be expressed using that particular equation. So, that is why here L12 is called a coupling coefficient, okay, and represents the coupling effect. How another component, okay, is affecting the transport of one separate or one other component, that is being expressed as coupling effects, or we call these coefficients are coupling coefficients, whereas the L11, which is actually the flux of component 1 under its own gradient. So, that is why it is called L11 is called the main coefficient. So, according to Onsager, the scientist who has actually proposed this nonlinear non-equilibrium thermodynamics and this coupling coefficient. So, he says that coupling coefficients are equal, hence we can write that L12 equals to L21. Okay. So, this means that 3 phenomenological coefficients have to be considered. So, we just reduced instead of 4 to 3. So, 2 other restrictions also applied. So, these are the things which he has actually suggested. So, L11 and L12 also should be greater than equal to 0, then the multiplication of L11 and L22 should be greater than equal to the square of the L12. Now, the coupling coefficients may either be positive or negative, this is also very important. So, usually the flux of one component increases the flux of the second component. So, when the flux of one component is getting increased by the effect of or contribution from the flux of another component, then this is called positive coupling. Now, the positive coupling often results in a decrease in selectivity, which is not good actually. So, non-equilibrium thermodynamics have been applied to all kinds of membrane processes as well as to dilute solutions consisting of a solvent, which is actually usually water, and a solute. The characteristics of a membrane in such a system may be described in terms of 3 coefficient or transport parameters. So, what are those? The first one is the solvent permeability, which is given by L. The second is solute permeability, which is given by this omega, and the third is reflection coefficient, which is given by this sigma. Using water as a solvent and a solute S, the dissipation function in dilute solution is the sum of the solvent flow and solute flow multiplied by the conjugate driving force. So, we can write the dissipation function phi as a mixture of or we can say the summation of 2 different fluxes. That one is Jw, which is the flux due to water, another is the Js, which is the flux due to salt. Okay. So, we can write dissipation function phi equals to Jw and then delta mu W plus Js delta mu S. Now, the chemical potential difference for water is given by, so delta mu 2 minus delta mu 1, which is we can write in terms of pressure is like this, Vw, that is the molar volume, P2 minus P1 plus RT ln A2 minus ln A1. So, where subscript 2 refers to the phase 2 permeate side, okay, and subscript 1 refers to the phase 1, that is feed side. Osmotic pressure we can express as pi equals to RT by Vw ln A. So, therefore, the chemical potential difference of the water becomes delta mu W equals to Vw delta P minus delta pi, writing expressing in terms of osmotic pressure. So, the chemical potential difference for the solute, okay, can be written as Vs delta P plus delta pi by Cs. C is the concentration of the solute. So, on solving the above equation, the dissipation function may be expressed as, so Zw Vw plus Js Vs into delta P. So, this is the pressure term, then Js by Cs minus Jw Vw and into delta pi. This is due to the osmotic pressure. The first term represents the total volume flux Jv. So, total volume flux Jv equals to Jw Vw plus Js Vs, while the second term represents the diffusive flux, that is Jd. So, the diffusive flux is Js by Cs minus Jw Vw. Now, the dissipation function has thus can be written in terms of the total volume flux as well as the term and the diffusive flux phi equals to Jv delta P, okay, plus Jd delta pi. So, the corresponding phenomenological equations will be Jv equals to L11 delta P plus L12 delta pi and Jd equals to L21 delta P plus L22 delta pi. Now, again the same restrictions which was recommended by Onsager also applies here. Concerning the of course, the magnitude of various coefficients. So, L21 equals to L12 and L11 should be greater than equal to 0, L22 should also be greater than equal to 0 and the multiplication of the factor this L11 L22 must be greater than equal to square of L12. The first assumption reduces the number of coefficient to 3. The flux equation indicates that even if there is no difference in hydrodynamic pressure across the membrane, there is still a volume flux. This is very important to understand. So, if there is no hydrodynamic pressure difference across the membrane, still there should be a flux. Okay. And if solute concentration on both sides of the membrane is same, there is still solute flux when the hydrodynamic pressure across the membrane is not 0, right. So, the flux equation also allows some characteristic coefficients to be derived when there is no osmotic pressure difference across the membrane. Okay. So, when there is no osmotic pressure difference across the membrane, the flux can be the flow can be written as this. So, that means when that no osmotic pressure difference means here delta pi becomes to 0. So, the total volume flux when delta pi equals to 0 is L11 delta P, or we can write L11 equals to Jv by delta P when delta pi becomes 0. So, L11 is the hydrodynamic or water permeability of the membrane and is often referred to as LP. Okay, so please do not confuse with different types of notations in different books. Okay, so L11 is the hydrodynamic or water permeability, which is also called as the LP, known as also LP. Okay. So, the table summarizes some of the average LP using water as solvent. For reverse osmosis it is less than 50, ultrafiltration 50 to 500, microfiltration greater than 500. So, the unit is liter per meter square hour atmosphere. So, when there is no hydrodynamic pressure difference across the membrane, that means delta P equals to 0, the diffusive flow occurs because of the osmotic difference, right. So, JD at delta P equals to 0 equals to delta L22 delta pi, or we can write L22 equals to JD by delta pi when delta P equals to 0. So, what is L22? L22 is called the osmotic permeability or solute permeability and is referred to as omega. The third parameter, the reflection coefficient, can be derived from the steady state permeation measurements. When no volume flux occurs, that means JV equals to 0 under steady state conditions, L11 delta P plus L12 delta pi equals to 0. That means delta P when JV equals to 0 we can write that it is equals to minus L12 by L11 delta pi. Now, when the hydrodynamic pressure difference is equal to the osmotic pressure difference, okay, L11 is equals to L12 and there is no solute transport across the membrane and the membrane is completely semi permeable. This is what ideally a membrane should be. Okay. However, membranes are actually in real life practices they are not completely semi permeable, okay, and the ratio of L12 by L11, which is called the reflection coefficient, is usually less than unity. So, the reflection coefficient is a measure of the selectivity of the membrane and usually has a value of between 0 to 1. So, if it is 1, so it is ideal membrane, that means no solute transport. If it is less than 1, not completely semi permeable, so solute transport occurs. If it is 0, so there is no selectivity. So, this reflection coefficient is a very important parameter which is directly tells us the selectivity of the membrane. So, if you substitute this reflection coefficient equation to this volume flux and the diffusive flux equations, then we can write volume flux as volume flux JV equals to LP delta P minus this sigma delta pi. So, solid flux also can be written as JS equals to CS 1 minus this sigma JV omega plus omega into delta pi. Now, the above equations indicate that the membrane transport across the membrane is characterized by 3 transport parameters. So, what are those? First one, water permeability, second solute permeability, and third is reflection coefficient. So, let us now summarize that the membrane transport is governed by these 3 things. First is water permeability, second is solute permeability, and third is the reflection coefficient. So, when membrane is freely permeable to the solute, so that is a sigma equals to 0, the osmotic pressure difference approaches 0, then the volume flux can be written as JV equals to delta LP delta P. So, this is the typical equation for porous membrane, okay, this is the transport equation, right, where the volume flux is proportional to the pressure difference. So, you can see this, your volume flux is directly related to the pressure difference, or and LP, usually the LP is the constant. Okay. The thermodynamics of irreversible processes are very useful for understanding and quantifying the coupling phenomena. However, structure related membrane models are more useful than the irreversible thermodynamic approach for developing specific membranes. Transport occurs through the pores in porous membrane rather than the dense matrix, and the structure parameters such as pore size distribution, porosity and pore dimensions are important. The selectivity of such membranes is based mainly on differences between particles and pore size. Because of the existence of a driving force, the component within the membrane is transported from one side to another by diffusion. The selectivity in these membranes are mainly determined by differences in solubility and diffusivity. Hence, the important transport parameters are those that provide important information about the thermodynamic interaction between gaseous and liquid permeants. Interactions between polymer and gases is generally low, whereas strong interaction often exists between the polymer and the liquid. As the affinity increases in the system, the polymer network will tend to swell, and this swelling has a considerable effect on transport. and such effect must be considered in any description of transport through the dense membrane. So, that is the problem in dense membranes. So, these are some of the actually problems when you deal with dense membranes. So, more or less in industrial practices on industrial parlance, most of the membranes that are being used in commercial or in large scale are all porous membranes. The use of non-porous membranes are very less, though it is being used commercially and as well as industrially also. However, due to these transport problems and there are other problems associated with the dense membrane. So, usually the porous membranes are being preferred. So, you can see the book Mulder for today's lecture. Actually mostly it is taken from that. Okay. And apart from for today's lecture, you can also refer the last book Richard Becker. In here also transport is also given very nicely. So, the next class we are discussing the transport of porous and non-porous membranes, and the we will discuss also the concept of osmosis. So, we will discuss transport through porous membranes, transport of gases, Knudsen flow and friction model in our next lecture. So, thank you very much. In case you have any query, do feel free to write to me at kmohanty@iitg.ac.in. Thank you.